Well, the allegations are that Sudbury by-election hopeful Andrew Olivier was asked to step aside by Liberal advisors so that a preferred candidate, the former NDP MP Glenn Thibeault, could run. Well, joining us now for more on the fallout surrounding the Sudbury race is Rob Ferguson, reporter in the Toronto Star's Queen's Park Bureau. Rob, welcome back to the program.
Thanks, Pia.
Okay, for those people who weren't paying attention, there's a lot to pay attention to in this race. Just set the scene. What happened here?
Yeah, it was probably one of the most exciting by-elections or elections we've had in years, and I certainly don't remember one any better with more ingredients. We kept saying it was like a House of Cards episode because there were so many plots and subplots and personal intrigue and defections and double-crossing and people calling each other traitors and whatnot. So it was really a battle between the NDP and the Liberals, and it was more than that. It was a grudge match. These parties have fought really hard against each other in the minority parliament before the last election in June, where Kathleen Wynne won a majority. So back in the minority, the NDP tried to assert itself, tried to get extra things in the budget as a condition for keeping the government alive. And then, of course, the election came and the Tories collapsed and the Liberals, that allowed the Liberals to win. So in that election, the NDP took Sudbury away from the Liberals. The Liberal MPP and Cabinet Minister Rick Bartolucci retired. He'd held it for 19, 20 years. The NDP ran a local school teacher. He won. This was huge for the NDP because they also won two other ridings in Windsor and Oshawa that had been Liberal and Tory. So they were up 3 seats there. However, the NDP also was accused of running a campaign that was too populist and went too far right, and they lost 3 key Toronto ridings with some veteran MPPs. So they walk into this by-election already at each other as to who's doing the best. And the NDP MPP who won in June quit after 5 months in the job for unspecified family reasons. So that was a huge blow to NDP leader Andrea Horwath. She had just survived a leadership review where people had been, she did fairly well in the review, but people had been very critical of that election campaign. And so a lot was on the line here, and the Liberals desperately wanted it back.
It's interesting that you say that the Liberals desperately wanted it back, because it didn't matter, really, in a sense, who won, because the Liberals have a majority. And yet we saw the Premier up campaigning in Sudbury. I think something, she went there like a handful or 7 times during the campaign. What was that all about? It's
about bragging rights and about who's on top. And we all know the Liberals are on top, but they really, really wanted this seat back. And they wanted it back so bad that, this is where we get into the House of Cards, they went to Sudbury New Democrat MP in Ottawa, Glenn Thibeault, and convinced him to defect to the Liberals. Now, he'd already been on the outs with federal NDP leader Tom Mulcair, and apparently it wasn't too hard to convince him to get him to run. But in the process, what they did was the Liberal candidate from last June, who came within 980 votes of winning, was spurned. And where we get the controversy is that, of course, this candidate, Andrew Olivier, has accused 2 Liberals, the Premier's Deputy Chief of Staff, Pat Sorbera, and local Liberal fundraiser and operative Jerry Lougheed, who runs a funeral home, of offering him jobs to step aside. And the cool element, or the exciting element for Canadian politics, is that he taped the calls. He taped the calls because he's a quadriplegic, so he does that instead of taking notes. So I am pretty sure, although I don't know for sure, but I don't think Sorbera or Jerry Lougheed would have expected their calls to be taped.
Okay, we'll talk about what was said in those calls in just a minute. But just to be clear, basically the allegation here is that the Liberals said, hey, don't run, you're not going to run. In exchange for that, allegations is that we'll give you a job, basically.
Right. Some kind of a job.
Okay. What specifically is the OPP now investigating?
So the OPP went to court. They got a production order that Andrew Olivier had to hand over his tapes. What they did was they took certified copies of the tapes off of his cell phone, and they've now turned that over to the Public Prosecutor Service of Canada. They're doing it that way instead of using provincial Crown attorneys to avoid any perceived conflict of interest.
Okay,
there.
what's said on the recordings?
Okay, so
you got it in your notes there.
Yeah, sorry, I'm going to read from the fine print here. The first conversation was with Jerry Lougheed, the local businessman, who's a Liberal player up in those parts. He said he was calling on, or I think this was in person actually, and he said the Premier wants to talk to you, but I want to clear the conversation with her to make sure you guys aren't going to have a fight. I want to clear the way, basically. And he said, basically, we'd like you to step aside so that we can make Glenn Thibeault the candidate, because the Premier thought Glenn Thibeault had a better chance of winning. And here's the quote, one of the quotes from the tape, which was released publicly on Olivier's Facebook page, from Lougheed. They would like to present to you options in terms of appointments, jobs, whatever, that you and her and Pat Sorbera could talk about. So there's one. Later conversation was with Pat Sorbera, the Premier's Deputy Chief of Staff. She said to Olivier, there's lots of options that we can sit down and talk about. We should have the broader discussion about what it is that you'd be most interested in doing, whether it's a full-time or a part-time job in a constituency office, whether it's appointments, supports, or commissions, whether it's going on the executive, there are lots. And I think when she said executive, she meant party executive. That's
we should point out, Jerry Lougheed Jr. is also the head of the Greater Sudbury Police Service as well.
Yes.
Okay.
An added complication for our House of Cards episode.
Yeah. And the NDP are insisting that he be removed.
Yeah, the NDP and the Progressive Conservatives as well are saying Sorbera should have to step aside and Jerry Lougheed should get off the police board while the while the OPP investigates. Plus, Elections Ontario is also investigating whether this was bribery. Okay,
so there's a lot of tendrils to this. Let's talk about the Premier. Is there any evidence, or I don't want to say facts, but I don't know, allegations, strong allegations that the Premier is aware of the alleged offers?
That gets trickier. Now, there was a call between Andrew Olivier and the Premier, but Olivier says he did not tape it. And he has also said that she did not offer him a job. And she insists, and the Liberals have been saying for weeks now, that they weren't really talking about offering Andrew Olivier a job. They were talking about his future in the party. Now, of course, the opposition parties beg to differ on this, and people can make up their own minds. Everyone heard what I just read about a job or appointment or a commission, things like that. So, everyone's thinking, okay, there's smoke here, but in terms of criminal charges, is there fire? I don't know. I went to journalism school. I didn't go to law school. That's going to be in the hands of the prosecutors to decide. Of course, the opposition parties have already taken on the role of prosecutor in the court of public opinion, and they're saying, where there is smoke, there is fire.
Okay, we're going to talk about the investigation some more, and the other investigations that the OPP is doing into the Liberal Party. But come by-election night, what's the turnout like? I mean, this is salacious stuff, as you say, the House of Cards analogy. But what really happened on the ground?
Well, I think basically we would have needed Frank Underwood involved to get the turnout above what it was in the general election last spring, because the turnout was down about 10%. It was around 40%. Right. And all the candidates had said they really hoped that all this furor, because this really did capture the public imagination in Sudbury, like everybody was talking about it. I mean, people were talking about it down here a little bit, but up there it was like
talk of the town.
It was talk of the town, total talk of the town, but it didn't get people out to the polls. So what could other factors be? Well, the election wasn't going to change the power structure at Queen's Park. It's winter. Maybe people saw what was happening in terms of Glenn Thibeault defecting from the NDP to the Liberals, and the NDP MPP who quit after just 5 months into the job. I mean, maybe they were just ticked off. They're cynical, whatever.
The voters give the Liberals, the voters gave the party a majority, despite the two OPP investigations. The current investigation hadn't been launched before the by-election, but the allegations were public prior to the election. Given that voter turnout was so low, I mean, do voters just not care that they don't care about this?
We've been talking about this at Queen's Park in the press gallery all week, because you have a government, the Liberal government, that got re-elected in 2007 after raising taxes when Dalton McGuinty had said he wouldn't raise taxes. So they get back in. Then we've had, after that, we had the e-health spending scandal. We had the Orange Air Ambulance scandal. We've had the scandal over deleted emails and the gas plant cancellations for those plants in Mississauga and Oakville. And yet the Liberals just keep getting re-elected. And the NDP had a good record on by-elections. In by-elections the last few years, they've taken London West, Niagara Falls, and Windsor West away from the Liberals and held them. But they couldn't pull off Sudbury. So it makes you wonder, do people care about all this scandal, or does that mean that they think the opposition parties are that lame that the Liberals are still the better way to go?
Or are they apathetic?
Or are they apathetic?
Yep.
I mean, it's probably a combination of all three. It just depends who you're talking to.
And how long, do you have any idea how long this investigation is going to take by the OPP?
I gotta think, I don't know. They're playing their cards pretty close to their chest, but I don't expect it to take a huge amount of time. I mean, the Orange Air Ambulance investigation into questionable business practices has been like 3 years. The email investigation in the gas plants is 20 months. This is about a month. It's got to be wrapped up, I would think, in whether there's going to be charges or no charges in a month or two, I would think. I don't know what would take really any longer. I can't imagine there's more evidence to get. The police still have to interview the Premier and Pat Sorbera, but...
Well, let me ask about Pat Sorbera and Jerry Lougheed, because what happens if either or both are found guilty? Not so much legally, but politically, what would that mean?
Politically, it wouldn't change the results of the election at all. It would only void the election if the candidate was involved. So the winning candidate was involved. Which,
perception-wise, it would be terrible.
Yeah, for sure. Optically, really bad for the Liberals, but it wouldn't, Glenn Thibeault would still be the MPP for Sudbury. The others would face charges, whatever they might be.
As I said, this is the third OPP, as you said as well, investigation to the Liberal Party, the gas plants, Orange Air Ambulance, and you said those ones are still going on. I just want you to extrapolate a bit. For Kathleen Wynne, she's been able to distance herself pretty good from this stuff, especially from the gas plant mess, people would say. This affair in Sudbury, can it stick? I mean, can it stick to her where other things have not?
Well, for sure, this is her scandal. She's tried to pass on gas plants as McGuinty's problem, even though the opposition likes to say she signed some papers and whatnot about negotiations with the companies that were building the plants for compensation. But this, for sure, is like a 100%. Under Kathleen Wynne's umbrella, and the opposition says she's not dealing with it because they won the election. She went on holiday, and the opposition wants Pat Sorbera and Jerry Lougheed to step down at least until the investigation gets completed. And then take it from there.
Resumes on Tuesday, right? On February 17th.
And it's going to be wild.
It's going to be wild come Tuesday.
It's going to
You're
be wild
expecting that this is going to dominate.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And how do you think Wynne will fare in all of this?
Well, she's a pretty tough scrapper in the legislature, but they're going to be ganging up on her, and I think Glenn Thibeault is probably going to get a very rough ride from his former NDP colleagues on the other side of the House. So there'll be lots of theater to watch. Maybe some more House of Cards.
I was going to say more House of Cards to come. The actual House of Cards show, by the way, debuts in a couple weeks, the next season.
There you go.
So we'll have the Ontario version playing out live perhaps starting Tuesday, and then the actual Frank Underwood version back on Netflix a little while. Thank you, as always.
Okay, thanks, Pia.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.